All right, we can go ahead and get started. So I just want to welcome everyone to our webinar. I'm Jim Santilli. I'm the CEO of the National Transportation Safety Organization. And this webinar is going to cover pre-hospital blood transfusion and the USDOT grant program that's currently taking place. We have two phenomenal speakers this morning. Gam, who's the director of the Office of EMS for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and Joni Harvey, who's the deputy coordinator of the National 911 program, also with NHTSA. So thank you both for joining us, and thank you to everybody who took the time out of their busy schedule this morning to learn more about this great topic. So Gam, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jim. And Joni, if you could go and start the screen share. And so by the end of the day today, at least 100 people will die on U.S. roadways. And that is why the topic we are discussing today is so important. Today, myself and Joni Harvey will be talking about post-crash care, and one of the newest interventions that shows such great promise in improving outcomes, pre-hospital blood transfusion. Next slide.
Doesn't want to do it the easy way. There we go.
So this is our crew. All good, Joni. Yeah, no. This is our crew. We're based around the country. Again, I'm Gam. You have Joni Harvey on the line with me today. She's Deputy 911 Program Coordinator and is based out of Michigan. I'm on the East Coast in Washington, D.C. Next slide. The Office of Emergency Medical Services at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is one of the oldest programs at NHTSA. We started with our predecessor agency in 1967, and our mission is to build comprehensive EMS and 911 systems around the country so that we can improve response and outcomes from all emergencies, but in particular, highway crashes. Next slide. As you notice, we have a relatively small crew, but a very big mission. And the way we accomplish our mission is through collaboration with national, state, and local partners. It is all about relationships. We are people-centered, and we build relationships with folks like Jim so that together we can save lives on the roadways. Our goals, again, as I mentioned, build capacity, improve systems, improve EMS systems and 911 systems so that ultimately we can improve outcomes from all types of emergencies. Next slide. We have a big focus on data collection. And then bringing our partners together throughout public safety, public health, healthcare, emergency management, and others so that we can improve response. Next slide. So why is post-crash care important? Well, rather than listening to me, we're going to bring on a professional voice here, and you all can listen to a brief video on post-crash care. Negative on audio, Joni. You might have to.
Not working.
Yeah, you might have to do the stop sharing and then reshare with audio engaged.
Got it. Okay. Do you see it now?
Million calls are received by 911 centers. Many of these occur along our nation's roadways. Downed trees, someone driving the wrong direction, a distracted driver risking lives, 911 systems often help address problems before a crash occurs, such as heading off an unsafe or impaired driver. Even so, about 13 million traffic crashes occur annually, ranging from minor incidents to serious collisions. Law enforcement is dispatched to about half of these, and EMS clinicians respond to 1.5 million crash incidents every year. And as a result of those serious crashes, about 40,000 people die each year. But there's another number that's important to know. About 40% of people who died as a result of a crash were still alive when EMS clinicians arrived at the scene. That number is even higher, more than 50% for children. Working together, transportation and public safety leaders have an opportunity to save more lives. As dedicated and skilled as our 911 and EMS professionals are, these systems, vital to providing post-crash care, are ripe for innovation. When 911 receives a call about a crash, the telecommunicator confirms the location and other relevant information. A number of measures can help improve dispatch decisions and response times. First, better geographic information system data will provide precise location of the crash. So will the transfer of vehicle crash data, which can also provide information about potential injury severity. 911 protocols also help determine the appropriate response to an incident, and telecommunicators trained in emergency medical dispatch protocols can instruct bystanders to provide care until help arrives. Currently, just 43% of 911 call centers nationwide use this tool. When someone is trapped in a vehicle, especially if it takes significant time to free them, their chances of survival drop. Fire rescue responders need improved training and tools to extricate patients. But there's more to be done. Too many crash patients die from severe blood loss. An EMS clinician with the training and resources to transfuse blood at the scene can significantly improve chances for survival. If pre-hospital blood transfusion were widely available, thousands of lives could be saved. And finally, 911 and first responders also need to be trained in traffic incident management, which can reduce the chance of secondary crashes and ensure emergency personnel are safe as they care for those involved in a crash. If we're going to strive toward zero deaths on our roadways, we need to continually improve post-crash care with enhanced roadway incident detection and dispatch, improved data sharing, and innovations like pre-hospital blood transfusion. All are key for improved response and better care. When EMS, 911, and highway safety collaborate, we can reduce the number of lives lost after a crash.
It's going to be one of those days, I guess. Hold on just a second. Well, Gam, do you want to talk a little bit about the video really quick while I get this pulled back up?
While Joni's pulling the slide deck back up, I'm going to drop a link in the chat to several resources, most of which we'll highlight today on our presentation, including a link to that video. So the link I'm dropping in the chat, it goes to ems.gov and our several post-crash care resources. We have infographics, the video you just saw, and others. So if you want to learn more and a little bit more detail on what we're going to talk about today, please go there. And in just a sec, get the deck back up, and I will hand it over to my partner in crime, Joni.
Okay, we'll hope for the best. Can you guys see it? Yes. Okay. So when we talk about the emergency response in 911, 911 centers typically will dispatch for multiple agencies. So you're talking police, fire, and EMS. There are some centers that only dispatch for police or only dispatch for fire and EMS, but they are 911 is dispatching the resources to these crashes. So we know that every year there's about 14 million motor vehicle crashes on the roadway. About 6 million of those crashes are 911 are dispatching law enforcement to, and on average, about 1.6 million dispatches from 911 are for our EMS and fire personnel. But there are other types of calls that 911 works with when it comes to highway safety that impact the roadways. So these are calls not only involving crashes, but other calls that occur along the roadways. So we could be talking about objects in the road. We could be talking about wrong way drivers. We could be talking about, duck crossings on the highway. There are multiple different types of call types that 911 receives calls for service for. It could be vehicles broken down, anything like those types of calls. They all come into the 911 center, and the 911 center is then what dispatches resources out for those incidents. So this is just another way that 911 plays a critical role when it comes to roadway incidents specifically. However, it doesn't really matter what the call is for. 100% of 911 calls impact our highway safety. So and I want to kind of let this sink in for everyone on the call. And it doesn't matter if it's a crash. It doesn't matter if someone is calling in for a sick person. It doesn't matter if it's a structure fire. 100% of calls from 911 impact roadway safety. 911 is helping to determine whether or not to dispatch emergency vehicles to that incident, or can we divert that or handle it over the phone. So we are either putting wheels on the road or we're not. So that's going to impact roadway safety. Are we going to send a single unit, or is it going to be multiple units, or is it multidisciplinary and we have to send multiple different agencies? So that's going to make a difference on highway safety. And then also priority. So are we going to be sending our units lights and sirens, or are we not dispatching lights and sirens? So again, it doesn't matter what the actual incident type is. Every single incident is either going to generate some type of a response with wheels on the road, or it's not. And that is going to impact highway safety. Here's some countermeasures that we have for 911 as far as improving roadway safety. We focus a lot on 911 operations. So one of our biggest resources that we recommend for operations is having some type of a structured protocol system. And these help us to provide those bystander instructions for immediate care before help can arrive. We also encourage, obviously, to have your 911 centers adequately staffed and trained. We are working a lot on data collection, data sharing. That was mentioned in our video earlier. So data, it's kind of unending right now. Are we talking about sharing our CAD systems? We are talking about radio systems that are interoperable. And that leads us into our interoperability. And our AACN, we're doing a lot of work in the advanced automatic crash notification space. What kind of information can we receive in the 911 center that could benefit our responders on the road? The information that could help us know when we dispatch a call that resources such as pre-hospital blood is going to be necessary. Maybe we need to ensure that we're sending a unit with extrication equipment because we know there's entrapment in that vehicle or there's a vehicle fire. So a lot of great information that we could have with there. And then our GIS systems. So if we don't know where these incidents are at, it creates a huge challenge and a huge barrier. Anyone who's worked in any kind of public safety field has been on those calls where you think it's over here because it's on Main Street, but Main Street is in 10 different cities in your same county, and you realize it's on the other end of the county on Main Street over here. And that really has an impact on roadway safety and patient outcomes. So our geographic information systems to make sure that we are routing 911 calls appropriately to the right center that's supposed to handle that call. And then also that we can locate those incidents when they come in and also locate our resources that are available. So it's multifaceted when it comes to GIS and the importance of that in our 911 incidents. I do want to focus just a little bit more on our structured call taking protocols, and this is in the operations countermeasures that we had talked about. So when we talk about 911 call taking protocols, it could either be emergency medical dispatch, it could be emergency fire dispatch, and emergency police dispatch. So these are 3 different types of disciplines, all having incidents that impact highway safety or roadway safety, because again, all 911 calls do impact roadway safety. So we'll start with the data collection and the call taking information. All of that structured, standardized information that we can get to make sure that we are gathering the right information so that we know that we are selecting the appropriate emergency response, that we are sending the right units, that we are sending them the right priority the first time. We don't want to wait for someone to get on scene and then have to ask for additional resources if we can avoid that at all costs. And then also those bystander care instructions. So whether it's, a first party, the person involved, a second party, someone on scene, we are able to help provide some necessary life-saving care to help keep that incident, keep the life safety going on that incident to help improve those outcomes until emergency response can arrive on scene. Right now, the information that we have is that only about 43% of 911 centers are utilizing emergency medical dispatch. This is only one of those 3 protocol types that I talked about, because there's police, fire, and EMS. And EMD, emergency medical dispatch, is the most widely used. That is something we do know. And this is not nearly enough. Not even half of our centers are even using the emergency medical dispatch. And that's a challenge that we are trying to help combat here. And then just lastly, I wanted to share, here's an example of if, there's 5,400 911 centers across this country. A lot of people don't realize how many 911 centers there are. And most of them are all operated at a local level. So when you talk about a stretch of road as long as I-95 that goes from Maine all the way down to Florida, it's 1,924 miles just for this one stretch of road. And you're talking 15 states and Washington, D.C. if you're driving that from north to south. That's actually almost 200 911 centers that would cover just the roadway itself if there were to be an incident on there. So you're talking 200 different jurisdictions and 200 different ways of handling an incident. So depending on where you're at, the resources are going to be different. Your care could be different. Your response could be different. In 2022, the fatalities were 360 just on this one stretch of road. So this is just trying to help, and these protocols and some of the work that we're trying to do here will help standardize some of those services. You're getting that same level of care no matter where you are. Gam?
So let's go back to some of the numbers and the scale of the problem that we're facing. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, approximately 100 people will die on U.S. roadways by the end of the day today. As probably most of you know, in 2023 alone, there were nearly 41,000 people that died of injuries they sustained in a motor vehicle crash. And of those, we know 43% were still alive when EMS arrived on the scene, but then died within a 30-day period. So this is an area of highway safety that is ripe for innovation. Next slide. Among those fatalities, unfortunately, we also know that 1,129 children died in traffic crashes, and among those, 55% were still alive when EMS arrived on the scene. So what does that mean? By the end of the day today, 3 children will die on U.S. roadways, and 2 of them will still be alive when EMS arrives on the scene. Obviously, that's a heavy burden for everyone impacted by the death of a child, but imagine the impact upon the thousands of responders and dispatchers who are dealing with these fatalities, as well as the many more serious injuries. Next slide. We talked about, so nationally, pretty consistently, 40% of motor vehicle crash fatalities are still alive when EMS arrives on the scene. We see this through looking at our FARS data at the national level. That percentage varies at the state level. So I encourage everyone here to look at your own publicly available data through FARS and have conversations with your highway safety, EMS, and 911 partners about what you can do to improve the system of care. Next slide. So I'm a paramedic. I am guilty of slipping into clinical speak. But I'm going to try and break it down as best I can here about the basics of why people die in a crash. So in the United States, the #1 preventable cause of death in trauma-related injuries is blood loss. And people die ultimately when they don't have enough oxygenated blood circulating in their body. So what this means for patients in crashes, you can die from a severe bleed in as little as 5 minutes. And I think folks, if you watch, movies, you can envision someone with an external bleed. And that certainly does happen in crashes where you see a lot of blood coming from someone. And that's why I think interventions like tourniquets and stop the bleed kits are so important. But also patients die from internal bleeding. A patient can lose their entire blood volume just internally into their abdomen. So you wouldn't actually see anything external, but they are bleeding to death. Next slide. We know what works to save these patients when they have these time-sensitive injuries where time is of the essence. And at a basic level, it comes down to finding the crash, caring for the victim, getting them to the right hospital, and then continuously doing system improvement. This is where relationships and collaboration and data sharing are so important. And actually, if you just go back one slide, Joni. So this system of care that we've talked about, as Joni talked about so eloquently, it starts with 911. 5,400 public safety answering points, 911 centers around the country. They are the first touch point for these crash victims. And we look at PSAPs at 911 as the air traffic control system for emergency response around the country. They are not only putting wheels on the road when calls are made, but they are also the first ones that are providing that critical first point of care. How did they do this? When they are emergency medical dispatch capable and they receive a call from a bystander, an EMD capable 911 center can provide what we call pre-arrival instructions, so they can actually direct callers in how to take care of a victim, whether it's opening their airway, controlling their bleeding, or doing CPR. Unfortunately, the majority of 911 centers in the country are not EMD capable, and this is a gap that we are trying to fill, working with our partners around the country. I'll go a bit into what it means to provide timely on-scene care, starting with that bystander care, but then when EMS arrives on the scene, the basic and advanced interventions that can actually be provided to that patient are critical to their survival. And then when we have a seriously injured person in a motor vehicle crash, following national guidelines, that patient should be taken to a trauma center. For many parts of the country, that means bypassing the closest emergency department so that you can go directly to that trauma center. We know this makes a significant, this results in a significant improvement in survival. Next slide. So I mentioned at the top of the hour that we were going to talk about pre-hospital blood transfusion and why it is so important. Next slide. So as I mentioned, severe bleeding is the primary cause, the leading cause of death the primary cause of death from injury in the United States. Time is critical when someone has a severe bleed. We know through the published literature that for every delay in administering blood and starting a transfusion for a patient, the risk of death increases by 11%. Next slide. So a joint statement published by the National Association of EMS Physicians, the American College of Emergency Physicians, and the American College of Surgeons found that pre-hospital blood transfusion could save as many as 37% of trauma patients nationwide if the intervention was available throughout the country. When I say pre-hospital blood transfusion, what does that mean? On a basic level, it means that rather than waiting until a patient arrives at the hospital or the operating room to start a blood transfusion, paramedics and other clinicians can start a blood transfusion at the scene of a crash. We know through research in the combat environment in Iraq and Afghanistan that if we can get a blood transfusion flowing into the vein of a patient within 30 minutes of injury, there's a significant improvement in their survival. So this is why this is such a important focus of our agency and one of our top priorities moving forward. Next slide. So it is a very powerful intervention. Unfortunately, it's not yet available throughout the United States, but we are working furiously with our partners to change this. There has been rapid growth just over the last few years. In 2024, there were only 100 EMS agencies out of the 15,000 in this country that were doing pre-hospital blood. But it's grown significantly just in the last 2 years. It's now over 370 programs in the United States, EMS agencies that are doing pre-hospital blood transfusions, and they span a number of different environments, both rural, suburban, and urban. Next slide, Jen. So let's bring this down to the individual level and what it means and why Joni and myself and others have such a fire in our belly about this intervention and why we're always eager to talk to people about it. So over 2 years ago, there was a 8-year-old boy crossing the street and was struck by a car out in Colorado Springs, Colorado. When EMS arrived on the scene, he was unconscious, only responding to pain, and had a systolic blood pressure. That's the top number of your blood pressure that was in the 50s. Fractures all across his body. He was unable to breathe for himself. But Colorado Springs Fire Department arrived on scene within 7 minutes and began administering a blood transfusion within 7 minutes of impact to this patient. He received 2 pints of blood before he arrived at the hospital and regained consciousness prior to hospital arrival, and ultimately was discharged alive only 2 weeks later. I've been a emergency responder. I'm still a clinically active paramedic, but I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've treated many patients just like this, and I've never seen one of them survive. For this boy in Colorado, it was obviously a very unlucky day for him to be struck by a car, but he was fortunate to be in one of the few jurisdictions where blood transfusion was an intervention because it made a difference in his survival. Next slide, Jen. As I mentioned, there are other blood programs throughout the country in different environments. Crawfordsville Fire department is an example of a rural agency, a population of 38,000 people, over 505 square miles. And they've been doing this since 2024 with, you see their trauma survival rate of 83%. That is an incredibly powerful number, especially given things like their really long transport distances to trauma centers. Next slide. Another rural example down in North Carolina, Wilkes County, population of 69,000, over 800 square miles. They launched their program 4 years ago and have a trauma survival rate of over 85%. Again, incredible numbers that we don't typically see elsewhere in the country. Next slide. We're doing a number of things to support pre-hospital blood transfusion. Number one, we talk to everyone we can about this intervention. We're also sharing best practices and convening meetings with stakeholders and developing a host of different resources so that we can accelerate adoption over the next 3 years. Next slide. On March 27th, our administrator, Administrator Morrison, announced the Pathways to Safer Streets plan, which is NHTSA's plan for improving roadway safety and accelerating improvements in roadway safety over the next several years. And it includes 8 pillars for improving road survival, and pre-hospital blood transfusion, expanding its adoption around the country, is one of those 8 federal priorities. And one of the main ways in which we are doing that is through the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program. And I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Joni, to talk about SS4A. And please pay close attention when she's speaking. This is very timely.
Yes, thank you, Gam. So the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, the fiscal year 26 notice of funding opportunity is out. It has been released. The deadline to apply is May 26th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. However, I do not want that to discourage or intimidate anyone away from applying for this grant. When you look comparatively at applying for any grant, let alone a federal grant, this application process is not anything near what you would have experienced with other federal grants. The application is only a few pages long. It is not cumbersome. There are many agencies and applicants that are not grant writers, and they are successfully applying for and being awarded grant funds with this particular grant. So I did want to start out with that. Just 2 weeks left to apply. There is $1 billion with a B that is going to be available. One of the most exciting things that we can say for this fiscal year with this funding release that is different than prior years is that public safety infrastructure, including pre-hospital blood and post-crash care and emergency response coordination type of activities, are going to be a priority when you're applying. So it is actually identified in the NOFO that these projects, again, including pre-hospital blood, and public safety infrastructure and post-crash care, those projects will be a priority for applicants. And that's very exciting for us. The agency has put a lot of work and effort into highlighting pre-hospital blood because they understand and know the difference it can make in saving lives. When you are applying for any type of SS4A grant, if you are in an area where someone else is already putting an application in, it would be a good idea for them to have some public safety infrastructure, pre-hospital blood, post-crash care, because those are priorities that actually will help potentially elevate the application itself. So Anyone who's, like I said, already putting in a grant, you can have multiple different projects on one application. The projects can be related to each other. They don't have to be related to each other. So if you are considering a pre-hospital blood transfusion program, also please consider if your 911 center does not have emergency medical dispatch or other 911 call taking protocols, please consider including that in your grant application. Those would be considered eligible projects for this type of application. I want to save time for specific questions. At the SS4A, the QR code that's provided there does give some details onto requirements for applying. One thing that everyone needs to know, if you do not have a UEI, it's a unique entity identifier. It's available at sam.gov. That's where you get that number. You have to have one of those to apply for any federal grant, and those can take a couple of days to get those numbers issued to you. So if you plan on being the primary applicant and your agency does not have a UEI, please register to get one of those as soon as possible. Do not wait until you're ready to submit your grant in order to apply for or register for a UEI. Gam, did I miss any high points that you wanted me to hit on before we open it up for questions?
You got it, Joni. Again, we want to see people apply to this program. Deadline coming up at 5 p.m. Eastern on May 26th. Yes, that is coming up quick. You have time to prepare an application and submit it.
And I guess two other things I would add on. Make sure that when you're putting in your application, you keep it focused. The problem is identifying issues with roadway safety, crashes, those types of things in your community. Yes, your projects may, benefit other things, and that's okay, but the focus of this grant is roadway safety and highway safety. So when you're filling out your applications, make sure that your problem identification is with roadway and highway safety. And you'll see two different types of grant applications if you go on to SS4A, and it explains very well. Like the website does a great job breaking these down for you so you know which one is the right one that you should be applying for. There's different funding amounts available for each one, but also different requirements that you have to have in place when you submit your application in order to qualify for each one. So take a look at that. There's also multiple webinars on this website. Some of them, a couple of them that we hosted with EMS, the Office of EMS hosted, and they're 911 specific, they're EMS specific, pre-hospital blood. We talk about the protocols. Those are on there, as well as just some generalized SS4A, how do I apply? Those types of webinars are available on there as well.
And Joni, I saw one of the questions was about eligibility. So to apply for SS4A, local governments are eligible to apply for SS4A, as well as organizations that represent multiple local governments, such as metropolitan planning organizations. But you have to be an organization that is specifically recognized in state law. If you are not a local government, that means that you cannot be the primary grant recipient. However, you can partner with local governments to be a part of the grant process. So if you are an organization like a nonprofit, I encourage you to reach out either to your local government that you work with, or organizations such as a Metropolitan Planning Organization or MPO.
And it's the same thing for states. States cannot be primary applicants, but they can participate in the actual grant. And you can have multiple different agencies or counties that are applying on one grant, and someone's going to have to be the primary applicant. Somebody has to draw that straw and say, okay, we're going to be the ones to apply, and then everyone else would have to be named within. And I can't open the chat because I'm sharing my screen. I don't want to take off that QR code unless everyone's done with it. But if you want to let me know any other questions, I see Ryan E has a hand up. That's the only one I'll be able to see probably. Ryan, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Ryan E?
Yeah, and I think that some of the questions in the chat are the same thing. Is we already have a blood program. We'd like to expand that blood program, or can those funds apply to the costs of the current blood program?
Sure. So you can't supplant your funds for an existing, but you can certainly enhance and expand. So if you've applied for SS4A before, that's another question that we get. That's okay. You can only have one application per fiscal year, but you can certainly look at enhancing or expanding existing programs.
Okay.
Daniel Crooks.
Yeah, so the question I had might be some of the place that some of the other EMS agencies got to on this. So I'm a county fire department that does a transport in our whole county. And we got to the point where I had the University of South Florida, myself working with our public works. We got all the way up to the final meeting, and the public works manager's like, yeah, I don't understand why this has anything to do with my road plans. And that really crumbled the entire thing because they didn't understand why EMS had anything to do with roads. So I didn't know if there's something you guys had on your end to help us on our end to explain to people who don't usually use this for EMS, like, hey, here it is. It's hard to give somebody a webinar. Hey, go watch this webinar. I need like an executive summary to hand to the department directors and say, hey, this is why I'm asking you to tag my plan. I'm not asking y'all to make the plan. I've got the university who's going to make the plan. I just need you to add it to your application. And it got shut down. Probably going to miss it because they didn't understand. And I didn't know how to explain to them well, other than we are part of Department of Transportation, because that's where EMS is. It not always makes sense, but that's where we live.
Yeah. So I just dropped in the link an explanation of what the safe system approach is. So this is really a national, international philosophy about how we improve survival for motor vehicle crashes, and it's centered around safer people, safer vehicles, safer speeds, safer roads, and post-crash care. So that's one resource you can go to, I think, to help foster communications with other sectors. The real change that that safe system approach is driving is it's getting people who don't normally talk to each other to talk to each other. And appreciate the challenge of, if you're talking to your partners who are in charge of managing the roadway, that they might not inherently understand that when a crash occurs, having a well-functioning EMS system that starts with 911 is critical to improving outcomes. So this is one resource you can go to that kind of, in a very simple way, it includes a graphic that shows what the safe system approach is. And earlier in the chat, I've posted some links to different infographics, one-pagers that we've developed to just, in a very simple way, explain why these countermeasures are so important. So hopefully those help improve and build the relationships that we're talking about.
In addition to the ones that Gam had talked about, and we didn't touch on it today, but traffic incident management, Tim, so all of that, another good example about how emergency response absolutely impacts roads, because you are making a difference on the safety of those roads with every call that you respond to. And when a crash does occur, that's that post-crash care Gam was talking about, your ability to help the survivability of those crashes. It absolutely impacts the road. And then you start talking about how long is it going to be closed down, and all of those types of trickle effects that happens every time there's a crash. So great information there. Thank you, Gam. Derek Loftus,
it's close. Good morning. I just wanted to kind of ask a question. This is awesome for like funding and applying for the grant. Where I am, the trouble I'm finding, or trouble that I'm kind of running into here, is like kind of step one of trying to find a blood bank that's going to kind of assist us with getting whole blood. And this is like the constant like roadblock that I keep hitting. And I'm kind of looking for some possible help or guidance, or I wish there was a system where I could just say, hey, I want to order this, and we pay for like overnight shipping or something like that. I don't know how else to put it, because this is great, but I can't do anything without the quote unquote product,
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that challenge, and we hear that from a lot of folks. Is when it starts to when it comes to starting a pre-hospital blood transfusion program, it takes typically a long time to develop that relationship with your local blood bank, because traditionally they're a partner that EMS has not worked with. So it does take time to develop that relationship. I dropped a link in the chat to the Pre-Hospital Blood Transfusion Coalition website. They have a lot of good resources, as well as a lot of good people that have a lot of deep experience now in setting up programs. So I encourage you to take a look at their website. They can they're very responsive as well. If you reach out to them, they can offer you tips and tricks about how you establish these relationships. At a national level, we have been working very closely with the organizations that represent the blood banks, organizations such as America's Blood Centers, the AABB, and the American Red Cross. Pre-hospital blood transfusion is a national priority for the blood suppliers, but we realize, of course, that ultimately those relationships start at a local level, and there have been a number of different approaches about how local agencies start setting up those relationships. So I encourage you to reach out to your partners. As I mentioned, there's 370 agencies around the country that are doing this now. If you go to the coalition website, you can actually see a map of all the existing programs and reach out to those folks, and they can offer you some really good tips.
Thank you.
Stuart Sullivan.
Yeah, good morning. I have an easy question here. The email that we'll be receiving for those of us that requested this presentation, Jim, is that coming from you at your NTSO email?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. I gotta let my IT know. If not, it'll get blocked. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sounds
That's all.
good.
David Brownstein.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. In the application, they're pretty at the Safe Streets for All application. They're pretty clear about needing to have an already existing action plan in place, and then applicants choose to implement a portion of that plan. We're a nonprofit EMS provider. We can partner with a municipality that we serve, but it looks like in order to be granted or to get an award, that municipality has to have an action plan in place that would include blood products, right? Or do you not see it that way?
It depends on which type of application that you're going to put in. So if you're doing a planning and demonstration grant, you can actually do concurrently, you can create and or update an action plan and have demonstration projects on one application. If you have an action plan already in place that names blood or whatever project it is that you're trying to, or strategy that you want to inform, and that action plan is signed, sealed, delivered, approved, all good to go, then you could apply for an implementation grant. So it just depends on which type of grant you want to go for.
So the planning piece would be working with the municipality on putting that in to the action plan. And you're saying you can do it, you can do both at the same time. You can say, we're going to put the plan in action. We're going to we're going to design it into the plan in the municipality and implement a blood on board plan.
Yes, sir. Yep. You can do them both, and you would do them both. You would do them both on one application. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
We don't take them. It's one of the smaller ones. You can just, like, is it a small kitchen one, or is it a big one, or? Yeah, you can just discharge it and throw it in the garbage.
Bruce Evans.
Hi, Gam, thanks for presenting this, and Joni, always good information to keep piling on this stuff. I echo the same problem that we're having with blood banks here in Southwest Colorado. Just curious, Gam, I know that we've had some discussions about other causes of death, and certainly hypotension and loss of blood is the big issue, but a little bit more focus on the SS4 implementation grants with trying to decrease scene time, trying to make sure that advanced airway or airway compromise is corrected, and including tension pneumothorax. And then and my last question would be that, we have flirted with a Scorpion truck, for lack of better description, or some kind of protection vehicle on our 2-lane stretch of highway that's pretty significant. And is that are vehicles a fair game in the SS4 grant?
Great question, Bruce. Joni, correct me. I think some grantees have leased vehicles, but there are restrictions on vehicle purchases within SS4A. So I encourage you to look at the FY26 NOFO, that is Notice of Funding Opportunity, that is live now on the SS4A website. One of the new things in there is is support for public safety infrastructure. And if you go in that NOFO, it defines what public safety infrastructure is. So, aside from vehicles, there are other parts of your systems, such as your communications infrastructure, that are fundable as demonstration projects if you apply for a planning and demonstration grant. And I don't think we actually mentioned this before. So of the roughly $1 billion available, about 1/3 of that is available for planning and demonstration grants this year, and 2/3 is available for implementation grants. Also dropped in the link in the chat a link to a map that shows all the SS4A grant awards to date over the last 4 years. So if you decide as an agency that you're not ready or not in a position to apply for an SS4A grant directly, I encourage you to look at that map and see what existing grant awardees there are in your area and reach out to them. Because we have seen this, a number of grantees are in the process of developing their comprehensive highway safety plan, and they have brought in their public safety partners to that conversation and to become involved in that planning process. So we have seen quite a lot of that, and it's always worth that phone call to your partners in your localities.
And before I move on for our next couple of questions, I forgot to mention, so for this bucket of funding that's been allocated for SS4A, this is the last year. So if you think you want to wait till fiscal year 27 SS4A, there isn't any fiscal year 27 SS4A right now. So this would be the time to do it. And these projects, the awards are likely to be announced before the end of this fiscal year, or I'm sorry, calendar year, by the end of this calendar year. So if you're not ready to start these programs tomorrow, good, because it's going to take a minute to get these reviews done and the awards announced. And then there's the process of administering and signing agreements and those things. So please consider getting your application in, even if you're not ready to start tomorrow, because there is no guarantee there will be additional funding next year. Teresa.
Okay, so thank you for putting this on. I'm sure everybody's got the same sentiment. I am fairly new to this part of EMS. I've been in EMS for 10 years. This is a little different. I work for a non-for-profit agency, and I was just wondering if you could give an example of the local government that we could use, because we are non-for-profit. I know it sounds silly, but like I said, I'm new to this portion of it. We're in upstate New York, so I did take a look at the map that GAM had sent. So it looks like we have some resources that we can utilize in Onondaga County as well as here in Oswego County. But that was my question. Just who can we talk to, or who would be an example of local government for us?
Well, one if for New York, one that comes to mind immediately, the town of Colony EMS received an SS4A grant award. I think it was FY24. Robin McHugh actually was the applicant who developed the applicant for town of Colony, and when they submitted their application, they were the prime applicant. But they included several other towns in their application, so they were really taking a regional approach. Encourage you to reach out to, particularly since you're in New York, to reach out to Chief McHugh, or even give your state EMS office, Ryan at your state EMS office, a call as well. I know we are running up against time here.
Yeah, we've received applications from cities, from counties, from 911 centers, from police, fire, EMS agencies. It's just because they're all so different, you'd have to just make sure that they meet those eligibility requirements as the primary applicant.
Okay,
Jonathan, I skipped over you on accident. Thank you, Teresa.
Joni, just one quick question before we move on to Jonathan.
Sure.
So for you and GAM, a nonprofit EMS agency, they really could put the grant application through the communities they serve, correct?
As long as those communities meet the eligibility requirements, because like, let's say they're 911 dispatch center. I mean, you'd think automatically that those would probably qualify, but they're also different, or they can be different. So you just have to meet those eligibility requirements as far as being a, Gam, you said the exact term when we started. What was it?
Oh, I don't remember.
I can't look at anything because I'm sharing my screen and I
Yeah,
don't want to mess anything up. So I don't want to
Yeah.
touch anything.
Ultimately, the applicant, the organization actually submitting the application has to be a local government of some form.
Yes.
So it has to be recognized in state law, and realize there are lots of EMS agencies out there that are nonprofits. Encourage you to, the local government or governments that you are supporting through response, talk to one of them and work with them to submit an application, because the actual award has to go to that .gov recipient.
And we've had some universities apply too, but there's also specific requirements. So it's not all universities. Again, you'd have to refer back to the NOFO, but the website is pretty clear on helping with that. And if you're not sure if someone qualifies, you could always email the ss4a.gov general email box and just say, hey, we're so-and-so. We're wondering if we're an eligible entity to apply. In the meantime, I would get going on the grant application itself, like I would be doing them at the same time, just because of we only have, the 2 weeks left to apply.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Sorry about that, Jonathan. We'll move on with your question.
Yeah, and
No
I apologize. I have a hard stop, so I have to jump. But great speaking to you all today. Jim, thank you so much for the invite. So I'll jump off. See y'all.
Okay, Joni, are you able to stay on a couple minutes or?
Yes, I will answer what I can. Your blood expert just left, but I will absolutely do what I can. Jonathan, third time is a charm.
Yeah, right. Good morning. Thank you guys so much for putting this on. Couple quick questions, and I think mine have mostly been answered. Like many of the people here, we're a nonprofit. I have reached out to my county judge executive, though, and talked about this and started the application, but it was where I had to list as far as the applicant who's receiving it, and I think I kind of got that question answered. Is there a preference, honestly, though, my question? Would I rather go through my county or through, like, the county seat city? Is there any kind of discrepancies that kind of favors one more the other, or is it just kind of who's willing to work with me more? Luckily, it's an election year, so politicians are willing to work with first responders, so we got that going for us.
Yep, there's nothing on, at least as far as the reviewer side, city or county or any of that. One doesn't take any precedent over the other. Just if they're eligible, and then they'll start looking at the project itself or projects.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Mandy.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm from Texas. I'm the executive director of a regional advisory council, and we are rolling out our state-funded pre-hospital whole blood program. My question is, I currently serve 18 counties, and our project encompasses several of those counties, 3 different EMS agencies. Do you have any suggestions, or have you had any experience with any Texas RAC leaders partnering with a specific, because I cover so much area, I was wondering if you had any direction on or guidance on where would be the best place to go, since I do encompass such a large area. But I do think that it's very important, and I value this work, and I think that any help that we can get to get this on the streets and available would definitely improve the outcomes for our patients. We are more rural. We do have an interstate that runs through our region, if that helps any.
I mean, we encourage pre-hospital blood, whether you're in the city or rural. There's, urban, wherever, because there's benefits to it no matter where you are. I would say look at that map that Gam put the link in the chat, and just kind of see if there's any of the agencies that are already kind of on their way, and then you can maybe narrow it down from there. But as far as I'm aware, there's no real limit on the size of the geographical area that you're going to apply for. Just keeping in mind, if it's a planning and demonstration grant, those projects are pilot projects. So, and the implementation projects are implementation projects. So you just have to make sure that the bigger the area, that you're justifying that it's a pilot project. But yeah, and just take a look at those. I would start with that map and then kind of go from there and see who your relationships are built with, and who's ready to move forward on the projects. Looks like we have, I don't know the order now, because I know that Jonathan, did you still have a question? I see Jonathan, Bruce, and Ian. I don't know if Jonathan and Bruce still have questions or if those were from before.
I don't. Sorry, I removed the flag on the hand. I didn't see it was still up.
Thank you.
Yeah, Joni, I still have a question. I don't know if you or Jim can answer it, but so we had a planning grant and we completed it. We were under budget and under time, and then we went for the implementation grant, didn't make it the first round. One of the things that's in our implementation grant, which we got from our planning grant, because we, part of the deliverable out of that grant is to do some community meetings. And we heard like multiple community meetings that the CDL training was subpar. And so we put in, after I think talking with somebody at NHTSA, maybe our state mentor, we put in to do a public-private partnership through the fire district to do a CDL training center as a demonstration project. And I'm just wondering, was that too much? And even though it's in our planning grant that's a problem leading to crashes, how close is the implementation grant tied to the planning grant recommendations? And is there anything outside the scope, if it, like I said, if it's generated in a public meeting and it's recorded and it's put into the planning grant, is that fair game?
That's really going to be specific to all of that supporting information. So I wouldn't be able to speak to it unless it was like your reviewers are going to have to just look at everything in totality that's submitted with the application. I do know that there's a way to bundle your applications when it comes to, you could do implementation and planning and demonstration, but that's definitely getting a higher expertise than I have when it comes to SS4A, but they do have that type of option on the website that you could look up. So if you're worried about maybe they kind of creep over each other and you're having to pick which one is the right one, maybe you want to consider looking at the bundle application and see if that your project may fit that a little bit better. Ian.
So with the implementation grant, we already have blood and we already have EMD. Is there, what does the implementation grant actually cover? Like, does it cover everything to do with a pre-hospital blood program, like the coolers, the blood, all that? Or is it just specific things? Can it cover blood over the course of the year? Because our current program, I believe, is costing us like 50 to 60 grand a year right now.
Are you talking about expanding the program? Because it won't,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah,
So
we
if
already
you're,
have a program. With
okay.
1 unit of blood, we'd probably look
Mhm.
into getting a second unit of the blood in the north side of the county, because we
Okay.
got about, I believe it's either 100 or 200 square miles that we cover with 3 stations. So
Yeah, we've seen previous awards that have been given where it's all inclusive. So if it's needed for the program, then the grant award has been given. And these are 5-year period of performance grants. So if that helps any, and that 5-year period of performance, that date starts the date that you sign the actual grant agreement. It's not the date that the deadline application or the date that the
Okay.
award is announced or any of that. So if that helps.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And I'll do one more. I'll do Charles. I know I could probably keep you guys for a while, but I want to be respectful of your time. And Jim, I hope you didn't have anything else going on that you're late for.
Oh, no, I'm good. I was going to say after Charles, I think there were a couple questions in the chat. If you got a moment, we can.
Oh,
maybe
okay.
just
Are you
address
guys
those.
okay for me to stop sharing? Because I don't want to touch anything and mess it up like I was doing earlier. So I can't see the chat right now. But if you want me to leave this up so that you have all of that SS4A information, you can just tell me
If you
what's
want
in
to
the
leave
chat.
it up, I can read
Okay.
the questions from the chat.
Sure. Okay. We'll start with Charles and then we'll go to the chat.
The only question I had is we in the process of wrapping up the implementation grant application, the action plan seems to be kind of the confusing part. Are you saying you have to have an action plan first that says you want to do these things that had to already be in place? Or are you saying that I can develop an action plan that meets what the implementation grant is about?
If you want to do an implementation grant specifically, then your action plan, when you submit your application, that action plan has to be completed and ready to go and done. You cannot update an action plan for an implementation grant. You can for a planning and demonstration grant, though.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Joni, I think this might have been covered already, but just to kind of reiterate, it says, could the grant cover the cost of blood units or just equipment?
All inclusive of the program. Please also get emergency medical dispatch and 911 call taking protocols if you weren't going to. There's my little plug-in.
And then this
You don't
question
have
is,
to, just encouraging it.
if we applied last year and did not get selected for the grant, does reapplying increase your chances?
Not necessarily, but you're not prohibited from reapplying. If you did not get selected last year, I imagine it to be pretty competitive again this year. So I would strengthen your applications a bit in some ways that we've been telling everybody they can do that, as like I had mentioned earlier, to make sure that your problem identification is focused on roadway safety and highway safety, and make it specific to your jurisdiction. So we have some areas that maybe used consultants, and which are great, and you certainly can do that, but you don't want to have your application be cookie cutter for someone else's, because then your problem down to the number of the number of crashes and things will vary just a little bit from your neighbor. So make sure that your problem is specific to your actual area. That will give a lot more strength to your application.
And then someone mentioned our challenge is our call volume for the blood would not be great, but when we have a trauma, it is serious. So is there any type of metrics, or can anybody apply for this program as far as their call volume?
Yeah, there's no metrics. If we can save a life, we want to save a life. So there's no minimum. You have to be able to save this, this many, or you have to have this much of a crash percentage. At the end of the day, if they have to start if they have so many applications, too much for the funding available. However, it is that the Office of the Secretary decide to start kind of figuring out the strength of applications, they may look at those kinds of things, but not initially. No kind of minimum there.
And then another question is, would liquid plasma qualify under the pre-hospital blood priority, or is that definition limited to whole blood or PRBC?
Not limited to whole blood. So blood and blood components would be, it's a pre-hospital blood transfusion program, not necessarily a whole blood program.
Okay, I guess we can go ahead and conclude from there if nobody has any other questions. So I just want to thank Gam and Joni for joining us this morning and giving this great information. I also want to thank each and every one of you for the great work you do to ensure our communities are safe, and when victims need assistance, you can provide quality life-saving assistance to them. So again, thank you for all you do. Stay safe out there and have a safe and enjoyable weekend.
Thank you.
And also, if you included your email address in the chat, or if you send an email, Kayla, my assistant, she's been logging all the email addresses. So as soon as we have the link available for the recording, we will send that out. And feel free to contact me at any time if you have any questions, and I can forward that on to Gam and Joni. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Jim.
Thank you.